Welcome, dear friends, for this interaction with Sudipto Das. And we'll be starting this interaction with Kirti Ramachandra, who's one of the finest translators from vernacular to English and one of our finest editors. She has edited Sudipto's first and current book, and Sudipto will be presenting the first a copy to her. So, Madam, please come forward.
Uh, No, I didn't find the right one. No, thank you.
I'd just like to say how much I enjoyed reading this book because it was a subject I knew nothing about. I barely got 35 out of 100 when I studied physics in college for the first year. But his first book, which has remained with me, The Ecos Clan, was also marvelous because he dealt with, apart from many other things, paleontological linguistics, right? And it was something which is so close to my heart because language is something I deal with, I work with, I love. It's my passion, it's my profession. And working with Sudipto was very easy because I would insist that he came personally, explained to me every experiment, every aspect of Jagadish Chandra Bose's work, because only then would I be able to edit, in the sense, make it easy for the reader to understand. And dealing with me was like dealing with the lowest common denominator. And therefore, the book has come out extremely well. He does so much research, so much reading. There's so much material in him, I think he can write 100 books on any subject. And I wish him all the very best. I hope this book really goes a long way. And I hope Ecos Clan is revived and you do lots of other things as well. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sudipto. Thank you for your kind words.
So, a brief intro of Sudipto. He's a writer and a musician who also happens to be an engineer, having done his undergrad from IIT Kharagpur. Regarding his background, Sudipto himself wants to talk about it.
Hi. I have a sort of ancestry which is a little interesting, and I take extreme pride in the historical aspects. So it so happened that in 1947, at the stroke of the midnight, the Bengal province was partitioned, and overnight, around 10 million people were rendered homeless, and over the next many decades, 10 million is 1 crore. And just for the perspective, the World War II created 15 million refugees, and the Bengal partition alone created around 10 million. And my father happens to be one of those 10 million people who gradually trickled into India over the next many years. And my father, he was around 7-year-old. He, alone with his elder brother, who was around 14-year-old, and another elder sister who was 9-year-old, somehow managed to come to India after a 14-day ordeal, which included waiting for a ferry to get into for 7 days. And he landed up in Calcutta with broken ribs, which he still has as a memento for his past. But that is not unique because there are around 10 million stories like that which none of you might have heard. And the Bengalis who moved to India from Bangladesh happens to be the single largest displaced community in the world, more than the Jews. And the reason that you don't know is what I am proud of, because none of these 10 million people actually resolved to violence. And that is the reason I'm here. And I believe I am the, chalta firta jita jagta sabut, what happens if one generation sacrifices and doesn't take to violence. I think apart from being Indian, being a Bengali, being a Bangalorian, being a musician, I think the identity which I take maximum pride is this: I'm the son of somebody who didn't become a terrorist and who could have become. That's it.
Super. That this aspect of the migration, it has been described beautifully in Sudipto's remarkable first novel, which I've read. It's called The Ecos Clan. It has also been brought out by Niyogi Books, who have brought out this book also. So, Sudipto, should we start with the...
So before that, so how I know Shevlin, so my first book was about this Bengal partition, which I think nobody knew outside Bengal, right? And as I told, right, that we have not been conspicuous is actually the achievement, because we resorted to violence, and only if you are violent, people know of you, right? So I am proud that we are not known. So it so happened that I went to Cochin for a book event, and then I was wondering, I knew that outside Bengal nobody knew about Bengal partition, so I was wondering, like वहाँ पे जाके बोले क्या, right? And then Shevlin comes and he speaks to me in a Bengali which is even more, correct than my son who is born and brought up in Bangalore speaks. And he told in fluent Bangla कि तुम्हारे partition है chapter गुलो खूब भालो है. I got the first Mallu I came across who speaks Bengali better than my son. And I knew of other connections between Bongs and Mallus like fish and communism, right? But, that was, and so that's about Shevlin. He stayed in Calcutta more than me. And since then, for the last, I think, 10 years, we have been friends.
I was born and brought up in Calcutta, so I'm a half Bong, I'm a Malayali, and my children call me Baba in tribute of my Bengali roots.
And also, like you would have noticed, he introduced me as Sudipto, not Sudipto. So that's a typical Bong thing.
Sudipto was Bengali, okay. So, Sudipto, my first question is, how did you get the idea to do a biography of Dr. J.C. Bose?
So an interesting anecdote. So yesterday I was there at the bookstore. I was trying to set up my books. And then somebody, ऐसे देखा, and then he spoke in Hindi to his friend. अरे यार, ये कौन है जगदीश चंद्र बोस? तो उसका दोस्त वहाँ से बोलता है, ये चंद्रशेखर बोस बोल के कोई था ना? वो बोलते साले वो एक्चुअली सुभाष चंद्र बोस है और चंद्रशेखर आजाद है. So then he told, वो तो ठीक है पर बे ये है कौन? So I believe that's why I wrote the book, right? So I'm keeping aside his scientific achievements, which I don't want to go into, but just to give you a snippet, he is modern India's first scientist, and now we know he is a co-inventor of radio, which Marconi, I don't go into that, but he's a co-inventor of radio, and also he had set up one of the first practical working wireless solutions in the world in Presidency College in Calcutta. He also holds the patent for the first semiconductor device. So semiconductor device is the chip that you see in all electronics. So wireless and semiconductors is something which drive our life today. From the morning you wake up till the time you sleep, in your phone, in your office, in your car, in your everywhere, right? So this guy in India, his work creates the foundation of both wireless and electronics, which is semiconductor devices. So that is not something which attracted me. What attracted me was his life, which appeared to me, more, I think, interesting than fiction. First of all, he's a scientist, but then he's an avid hunter. How many scientists do you know, like, who at the age of 19-year-old goes to Himalaya and hunts tigers? So he was a hunter. He was a horse rider. He was a professional scholar. Scholar is actually, rowing in England. Actually, rowing is called sculling. So he used to do professional sculling in Cambridge, and also he was caught in a storm while doing deep sea rowing. And more interestingly, there are two important Western women in his life, other than his own wife. So one was a very rich American widow socialite, Mrs. Sarah Bull, and another was an Irish revolutionary nun called Margaret Elizabeth Noble, who was christened Sister Nivedita by Vivekananda. Both these women were disciples of Vivekananda who came to India to love India, to serve India. These two women play a very important role in Bose's life. So his life is pati patni or wo do, right? And it's, yes, and these three women were also in very good terms. And how these three women played a big role in his life is again a story of how the West and East can blend together. Two Western women and an Indian scientist who is also a spiritualist. And finally, what attracted me is that if I have to plagiarize from Charles Dickens' line, right? The timeline of my bio, 1890 to 1910, that's it's the best of the times and also worst of the times. The geopolitics of the world was going through tectonic changes, which finally formed the 20th century. World War One was going to happen in some time, and there were some signs of that. Indian Swadeshi movement was going to happen, and I think Bose's life is entwined with all these things. So I believe it had all the characters and features of a fiction, just not any villain. If you put the British as a villain, that's a different thing, but otherwise it had all the elements.
Okay, next question is, what is the research that you did?
I went to Bose Institute in Calcutta and Shantiniketan. So Tagore had a very good relationship. And I think a lot of archives are available online. I had to pay the subscription, but I believe all the 120-year, 100-year-old newspaper archives of New York Times or the Times London were available. So it's mainly, I would say, online. Some free and some paid subscriptions.
Did you speak to the descendants of Bose?
Oh, there is no descendant of Bose. He didn't have any child. His girl child was dead. During birth, and he didn't have anybody. He had nephews. I couldn't figure out any direct descendant of Bose. In fact, Bose Institute also doesn't know of anybody who can claim to be, like his descendant. So his royalties, don't go to anybody. So that means, there is no descendant.
Okay, so if you are growing up in Calcutta like me, the only way you remember AJC Bose is because there's a AJC Bose Road. There's no other way you remember him. So my next question is, why do you think Bose is not as famous as, say, Rabindranath Tagore or Satyajit Ray?
Okay. So that's also one of the very interesting things. Like in the 1920s, Bose was so popular that I believe, I'll just give one incident. He was a member of the League of Nations, which later became the United Nations. He was the Indian representative of the League of Nations, and other members in his committee were Einstein, Nobel laureate, Henrik Lorentz, he was also Nobel laureate, and then Marie Curie. So there are 5-6 people who are all Nobel laureates, and then the first time he went to Geneva to attend one of the League of Nations functions, like Geneva, it was so crowded that even Einstein had to jostle for seat, and Einstein was so damn impressed with this guy. So from that popularity, now Chandra Bose Kaun hai, sort of, right? So I believe, so a lot of things would have happened. What I feel is his extra dependence on these two women, right? Like who contributed a lot to his life, and sort of as long as they were alive. They did everything for Bose, being his publicist, being his editor. So I think when they died, Bose, for the rest of the life, which is almost 30 years after the death of Mrs. Sarabul and Sister Nivedita, I think he somehow stayed as a confused person. He didn't have any disciple. So that is also another reason. And finally, I think his writings, his scientific papers became a little spiritual. Like, though it is not that his experiments were forged. He used to do tremendous amount of experiments, but his language became spiritual. He used to quote verses from the Rig Veda, from Upanishad, and he was extremely influenced by this one verse from Rig Veda, which in Sanskrit goes like this, Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti, which means there is only one, and the wise call it, in various ways. So his entire life was in the search of this one, right? And Einstein also spent the last 30 years of his life in searching for one unified theory which will combine quantum mechanics, electromagnetic waves, and gravity. So he also died in search of this. I think Bose also became too spiritual, and the scientific community never likes that. Like even today also, right? The moment you talk about Rig Veda, people will brand you as either a bhakt or a right hand, and what they call right wing. Okay, whatever. So वो उस time भी था. The moment he started quoting Rig Veda, right? चलो यार इसको कुछ नहीं आता है, right? So I think all these were reasons where he was lost, and I think it's up to people like us to again resurrect him.
Okay. One of the most remarkable things about the book is Sudipto's humanized some legendary figures, and one of them is Swami Vivekananda. Now, I was a member of the Ramakrishna Library in Gold Park. So there, Swami Vivekananda was like, really deified. But Sudipto writes about Swami Vivekananda as someone who loses his temper, he gets angry. So that is one of the more remarkable things of how you humanized a, legendary figure.
I think, the problem with, not only the bongs, right? Even, I think, in India, right? Anybody who becomes famous, you actually make him a prophet, right? And I think the moment you make somebody God, you actually kill that personality, right? So Vivekananda, moment you think him as a God, I think, there's nothing to learn from a God, right? Only you can learn from humans, right? So and most of the Bengali literature, and also in South also, Vivekananda is so damn popular that, if you say something, which is, which the Ramakrishna Bhakts might not like, they'll become wild, right? But I myself, studied in Ramakrishna Mission, mission my whole life. So I thought that a very analytical, literature about their personal life. It's not possible that Vivekananda was a god, right? He was a human being. He had virtues and vices, right? So why not talk about that? So, though it's a biography, but I tried to get under the skin of all characters, and mainly Tagore, Jagadish Bose, and also Vivekananda. These two are sort of very closely related. So, I don't know, people might like it, and again, some real bhakts might get a little angry.